Welcome back to Retire Southern, where we share authentic experiences and meaningful connections from the heart of the American South. I'm your host, James Lewis, and on this episode, we're at Serenbe, a place that's more than a community. It's a living experiment in harmony between people and nature. Our guest, Steve Nygren, left behind a successful corporate career to build something extraordinary, a thriving biophilic community rooted in radical common sense, family, and respect for the land. He's the author of Start in Your Own Backyard, a book that explores how transforming where we live begins with small acts of courage and connection. Steve, welcome to the Retire Southern podcast.
Thank you. Look forward to the conversation.
Yeah, no, so am I. It's a beautiful place, easy drive from Atlanta, which obviously is what brought you down here in the first place. But let's go back. Take us back to the beginning. Before Serenbe, before this development, what was your life like in the corporate world?
Well, I thought was an ideal life. I had all the trappings of success. Stouffer's Food Corporation had moved me here to open a hotel. And I just saw it's being rebranded once more as a Marriott hotel right there on West Peachtree and North Avenue. Okay. So it's fun to see those kind of things happening.
Sure.
But we opened that hotel in October, and I knew that my next movement would be to another city to open another hotel.
Right.
I'd come here from St. Louis, opening the hotel there, and I'd fallen in love with Atlanta. Now we opened it in October of '72. Mm-hmm. So Atlanta was hot and moving. I mean, there was this was the capital for young people in the South East, and I decided to stay.
Nice.
And so do that. I opened my own restaurant, which was at Linden and Peachtree, which was not an ideal location in 1972.
Okay.
All the hippies had moved in during the 60s, and when they left there around 1970, it left that whole area of Midtown just devastated.
Right.
It was empty in parking lots. But I was able to rent this building that had been built in 1900 and had been Vic's Delicatessen for 50 years. But in the previous 5 years, it had been 5 different restaurants, so it was pretty bad.
Yeah.
But I could afford the rent, and they sold me everything inside it for $12,000. So I'd go into the stupidest places, they said. And so I got calls from all over. And that's how we built a restaurant company.
Okay. Including Roswell, right?
Yeah, we were the first liquor license in Roswell. Mm-hmm. That was in '75. Here again, Dick Myrick was ready to lose that whole square. Everything was empty except Harriet Cohen's dress shop, and so we transformed that. And first liquor license in Decatur. But I got wise. Instead of leasing the space, I insisted on buying it, even though the Dan Patella didn't want to sell it. But it was the only way I'd go out. So that's how I built the company, and I thought things were, things were great. Right. I was serving on several boards, very politically involved, head of the Restaurant Association, and the Convention Bureau, and it was all the trappings. 3 small kids. And then my wife saw on the back of the Preservation newsletter that there was a historic farm for sale,
right,
just southwest of the airport. Well, we'd been traveling like everyone else north. I knew everything north,
right,
but open land this close, could that possibly be? I mean, I saw by that time that Roswell had filled in, mm-hmm. and because I had to drive through 4 miles of country to get to Roswell back then, and by 2000 that was totally filled in, and so I was curious, and so I called and said, we're not interested in buying anything, but if you have farm animals, would you mind if we pulled in to just show our darling daughters?
Right.
And of course, anyone with something for sale says, come on. And we arrived, they had the Shetland pony saddled, and we bought the farm.
I mean, so literally, you had never seen this place before.
Never seen it.
Sight unseen, you walk in just to show the girls some farm animals.
Yeah, I had never been to this area.
And you bought
it. And we bought it. And we let's do it. I remember the next weekend I called before we actually finalized, they drafted the contract. Before we finalized, I called the real estate. Well, maybe you should show us other things for sale down there. It was that
you want to look around.
You've been caught up in the moment, Right.
But
it just had this ring to it, and of course, when you have 3 daughters, Daddy, can't we? Mm-hmm. Would you? And the smile in their eyes that leads you to do something like that.
Sure.
And then my logical mind said, this open land this close to the city, that's a good investment.
Right.
Off we went. We had someone who was willing to rent the historic house. So we rented it out, no intentions of anything else. And my wife said, well, there's a shack in the back. Why don't we fix that in case we ever want to spend the night? Because I thought we'd come out a couple Saturday afternoons. This was going to be a fun thing. But we had a busy life, a great house in Ansley Park. We had almost an acre with pools and gardens.
Wow.
And it was just the ideal.
Yeah.
We were never leaving.
That's a beautiful area.
Yeah. I jogged there, met my business partner and jogged every morning in Piedmont Park, and could walk up to Peachtree for dinner and everything going on. Life was great. And we had restaurants right there at Colony Square, that we own. So the Country Place and Park. And to my amazement, it's where everyone wanted to come every weekend.
Right.
Where we had no toys except a puzzle for rainy days. And doing that every weekend and every vacation for 3 years was my value shift. People couldn't understand it, but I think post-pandemic, more people can relate to what I was going through when you reevaluate your life and what's really important. So I had an opportunity to sell the balance of my company. And one Monday morning on the way back in, on a January morning, I was reevaluating everything, and I was thinking, gosh, all the boards I'm on, are we really making a difference? Are we solving diseases? Are we really stabilizing the arts organization? Are they always going to go broke in 2 years if we don't erase X? And some of the politicians I was supporting weren't getting elected, and so that Monday morning I decided, hey, I'm going to sell everything.
Yeah. And
we did, and stepped off the treadmill without any intentions of doing anything like development. It was just to retreat, put the garden in, and that's what happened for the next 6 years.
That's amazing. So this is your Don Quixote moment that you referred to, which is a incredibly bold pivot. You moved down here. You even built a home on the property for your mother-in-law?
That's right. That's right. So
very early on?
So we restored the old house and we decided to move in. And then my mother-in-law, owner of Mary Mac's tea room. And so she, because of her age, she decided she needed to sell that. And when she did, we built her a house here on the property, and she was taking care of her elderly sister who had dementia. Okay. And so it was for the two of them, and they both ended up dying here on the property 5 or 6 years later.
Well, how important was it for you to have that kind of multi-generational experience for you and your family and your daughters?
Well, that was critical. And of course, that's the way I grew up. I come from a 5-generation Scandinavian farm family. So this just seemed natural to me. This is the way life should be. And for many people, because back in the 50s, we did not have these senior housing in places that we see today. Right. So it's more what we're used to today is actually unusual when you look at the span of time.
No, that's a great point. For anyone that has never heard of Serenbe, can you explain at 30,000 feet what it is?
Yes, Serenbe is a clustered community, very similar to European or a lot of places from 100 years ago, even in America, that is connected to nature. And so it just naturally, because of the land plan, connects people to nature and to one another. And that seems rather simple, but we don't see that anymore in the United States.
What's the current population of Serenbe approximately?
We have around 1,300 people, with people moving in all the time. But of course, one of the real differences between placemaking and development is we have so many restaurants and art galleries, and so they're supported by 80% of the people that drive in on a weekly basis. And we have conferences in here. So this is a lot of the street activity. It's not just our residents, but it's everyone coming to just experience life here.
Yeah. How many different neighborhoods make up Serenbe right now?
Currently, we have 3 rather fully developed. So you've got Selborne, which is the first one, focused on arts, with 3 current restaurants and the site for a future hotel that's planned. Grange is the agricultural. And so that's the lowest retail, but you've got the general store and the coffee shop and various retailers down there as well. And then Motto is health and wellness, and there we have now 27 health providers, from your traditional, your family docs and pediatrician who left the Piedmont system to set up their practice here, to the dentist, physical therapists, to alternative, some of the finest alternatives that you see. Someone said they were in Creek Retreat, and they said, well, I have to go to 3 places in San Francisco to find what you have in this one shop. It's amazing. Right. And this couple read about us in Boulder County, Colorado, decided this is where they would open their dream that they had been thinking about. They packed up and moved here. In fact, they negotiated their lease without ever having visited. And they have opened Alchemy earlier this year, which it turns out is the first non-chemical pharmacy in the United States. So because of the ethos that we have set up, we're getting these people in all these various areas coming here. And so our fourth that we're developing right now, we just started. We had the show house just there, so we're just starting that. Is Spella? That's the fourth, and that's with a focus on play, which is an extension of health. And it is around a 4-acre Victorian park. It'll have about 400 houses there. We're doing some fun things that just lift the spirits and for play of all ages. And then the fifth will be on education. Now, while we have the school here, and all these things are everywhere. Right. You know, it isn't that they want to, but in each of those we have commercial areas that really support on a foundational basis one of those 4 pillars of art, agriculture, health, and education. And so that will have things like an international school with boarding campus, semester away campus, a corporate conference center, and a bunch of things. So a lot more still to happen.
Yeah. Sounds like there's a lot more down the road.
That's right. There is.
Incredible. So your book's title, you just released the book, Start in Your Own Backyard. You say that it really started from a place of self-preservation. Can you give me a little bit more in that?
Well, that's right. Over the course of the time, as I mentioned, we bought 60 acres, and I had no idea why I did that. But by the time we moved down here, I'd had the opportunity to put the original 1904 farm land back together. So we had 300 acres, and I didn't know why I had 300 acres other than I just, the opportunity came and we kind of put the old farm back. So it seemed, and it guaranteed some of our trails and streams, and, so we loved to walk to. And then one morning in early 2000, my daughter and I were on a jog along our property line, what was in our property line. And when we came up over the hill, the bulldozer was flattening the forest next to us. And I ran out and I stopped the guy on the bulldozer and said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "We've just been hired to clear the trees. I guess they're putting houses here. That's what always happens." And so that was my wake-up call.
So what do you hope readers and future developers will take away from your philosophy in your book?
A lot of people expected me when I became concerned, and what had happened around here, other people like us. Well, one family, he's a doctor, his wife's a nurse, 3 kids. Their horse farm here was the 3rd location in metro Atlanta that they had in 20 years because they were up near Roswell, and then all of a sudden the subdivisions came into their backyard and they moved.
Right.
Then they moved over to Fayette. Pretty soon, same thing happened. Then they moved here. And so what happens, most people just see development coming and pick up and go somewhere else, further out. I decided not to do that. You see how close the drive is into metro Atlanta, and I love everything the big city, and I'm still involved in a lot of things in the city. Okay. So I didn't want to pack up and leave. And one of my first calls was to Ray Anderson. Now, for your listeners who don't know, Ray was the interface carpet guy that brought carpet squares to America. And then in the 90s became the first U.S. industrialist to put his company on a carbon neutral footprint. Ray had been a friend of mine for years as we watched him go through this whole transition. Okay. So at dinner I said, "Ray, you know all the smart people. Who can help me figure out how to preserve this area so it doesn't get disturbed?" And so Ray talked to the Rocky Mountain Institute. And Ray and the Rocky Mountain Institute brought 23 thought leaders here in September of 2000. And so I was looking for someone to give me the roadmap. Certainly someone could figure this out. And after that 2-day meeting, which Georgia Tech documented, we had the big leaders in land and agriculture and energy and what have you. I was frustrated. I said, "Ray, these are experts telling us how serious all these different issues are, but who's going to help me save this area? I'm still back where I am. I'm a little more depressed, but other than that, who's going to?
Nothing's changed.
Yeah. And so Ray sent me to see Vicki and George Rainey, who were just starting to do something outside Chicago. And of course, I knew Robert Davis, who did Seaside. And looking at all these things, I came back frustrated in a few months. I just keep talking, Ray, there's got to be somebody applying some of these principles. And he said, there isn't. That's why you have to. And somehow in that period of 6 months, I had stepped through that threshold of passion where you stop looking at reason. You stop looking at feasibility. Of course, I was never one, as I mentioned, who needed that. I was the ideal candidate when I started looking at this.
Right.
And then, of course, I had because I had the restaurants at Colony Square and the original restaurants there at Linden and Peachtree and Mix. I had 4 restaurants in Midtown, and I had stepped in when I asked to head up the Midtown Alliance. Okay. The area it had been formed as the Midtown Business Association through Central Atlanta Progress. They'd gotten the prostitutes out of the plate glass windows on Peachtree and some of the drugs off of Peachtree, and so they were stopping to fund that after a 4-year effort. And so the group panicked and came to me to see if I would take over as head of that organization.
Okay.
I negotiated with Dan Sweat at the time to give us another year's of funding, and I would stand it on its feet as its own organization. We brought in the neighborhoods of Ansley, Home Park, and Midtown, reorganized it as the Midtown Alliance, and moved forward. And then in a few years, the Woodruff Foundation gave us a big grant to bring in Tony Nielsen to lead the effort to look at Midtown zoning. And so in the 80s, that was changed to walkable when everybody thought that was crazy.
Right.
When we were going to ruin property values by not letting cars on Peachtree Street and garages and what have you. And so as I looked at it, I was the perfect candidate. I had been in a tutorial. And I knew what to do. And so we started by organizing landowners according to their size ownership, 500 landowners on 60 square miles.
Right.
And it was a 2-year effort. I can't say it was easy, but it also was not difficult. It was just a process that we did step by step. Got grants then to bring in professional planners. We brought in ECOS, which was a small group. We had people from all over the nation return to the RFP, but we chose this small local group, and we moved forward then with a public meeting process, and came up with this plan that if the large landowners would work with us on preservation, they could actually have more value than they ever imagined.
For listeners that are unfamiliar with the term, can you give us just an overview, a master's class on biophilic design?
Absolutely. It's the connection of all living systems. And 100 years ago, anyone developing naturally cared about the land, how they were developing, the trees, how the people were going to live. It was just without any taglines. They were interested in the whole living system of what they were developing. We have now, in this last century, become so siloed in how we think in the regulations that we're totally disconnected from what we're doing to the living systems, including our own humans that we're putting into these places that I call shelter. And so biophilic design was the perfect thing. To my amazement, once I decided that this just had so much meaning and common sense, I wanted to share it and share it with educators and policymakers on how we need to think of this. And so we wanted to form an organization. Puck Mickleby, an interesting retired Marine, who in his last year was called into the Pentagon with Admiral Mullen to look at the grand strategy for the United States. Now, this is probably almost 20 years ago. After their 2-year study, they came out and said that the danger was not exterior, that it was interior, and that if we did not deal with education and a sense of personal responsibility and reestablish our community vitality, we would rot from the interior. And he said, what you're doing, and he was our scholar in resident while he was writing the book. And so we talked about this, and he said, what you're doing here is literally a matter of national security to reestablish vital communities from the local level. And you need to form an institute. To my amazement, no one had registered Biophilic Institute. And so we formed the Institute,
right.
and today that moves forward with conferences focused to educators and policymakers. And we're working on a complete online network and a very dynamic board. So, and you're starting to hear biophilic design a lot more, especially coming out of the pandemic. I was amazing how much we're hearing it. And I was at the Global Wellness Summit speaking there, the year after, 3 years ago. And that meeting was at J.P. Morgan Chase on Madison Avenue. So when the big organizations are talking about biophilic design, you know it's coming more and more into the forefront.
Of course. I'm going to go with another term that you bring up in your book. You reference Richard Louv's concept of the nature deficit disorder.
That's right.
So can you talk about Serenbe's role in addressing the nature deficit disorder?
Well, absolutely. When we moved out of our perfect house in Ansley Park out to the country, all my friends thought I had lost my mind. They could not understand what I was doing.
Of course.
But intuitively, I just knew it. And 6 months after moving out here, we were having dinner one night, and I asked the kids, "Are you glad we moved?" You know, because life was different. It wasn't quite as spontaneous to go places and what have you. And they were 6, 8, and 10 at the time. And they looked at each other, and Garney, the 10-year-old, says, yes. And I expected her to say, well, now we have a pony. It's
horses,
it's the bunnies we have right out here and all these things. And she said, it's the freedom. And I just sat back and well, what do you mean, the freedom? And she says, well, we knew you were always looking out the window when we were in the backyard, and we could never ride our bicycle on the sidewalk unless one of you were with us. And we're free out here. And wow, I mean, as a parent, that really, that it amazed me that I was so unaware of how uptight we were, because I thought we had the perfect life for them.
Well, you mentioned you didn't think you were helicopter parents.
That's right. That's right. And so we were thought of it just the reverse, but to them, we always were watching, and I guess we were. It's just kind of it is part of how you feel. And so it was about 10 years later that Richard Louv's book came out, and a couple people said, "Oh, is this what you're talking about?" And yes. And so I sent Rich a note and said, "Hey, thank you for giving voice to what I intuitively know. Now I can explain it to all my friends. They can see what it is." And of course, Rich came back and invited me to what was then their Nature Connection groups, and became very involved there. So this is just naturally the way we're built because of our 70% preservation, and we have a trail grid and wandering streets. So you'll see every house opens into either a pasture or a forest or a farm, or if it doesn't open directly to it, every back door is within 400 feet of natural nature. Well, this automatically gives a sense of calm. And front porches that are used, they have to be a minimum of 8 feet wide, also puts eyes on the street. So this automatically makes all the streets more safe for kids to wander and run. And so there's just that sense of security and openness. And if you've noticed, you're pulling in here, you see kids and not obvious parents about. And it's the way many of us, my generation, lived 60, 70 years ago. And so one of our common things is, yes, we have free-range kids and uncaged elders because you see the multi-generations interacting all over the place.
That's hilarious.
And post-pandemic, we realize how we've literally caged those two bookends of our society, and it just isn't functioning, nor is it a very civil thing to do.
That's wonderful. Tell us about some of your favorite places in and around Serenbe, whether it's the inn, the farm. I mean, obviously, you talked about the restaurants, the hamlets. Just give us a little Steve highlight reel. Well,
I mean, it's a constant. It's a constant thing. All you have to do is walk the streets, and I think as a visitor, you can walk the streets, and you literally feel it. And a couple things I realize is with the fresh air, you tend to stand taller because your lungs are opening up. I mean, that's just kind of, but I've really thought about this question a lot. And I noticed the bigger the city, the noisier, the more polluted, people seem to turn inward more, and they start to kind of look down and inward. So I think it's really more about fresh air than anything, where people are willing to embrace nature. Yep. And in doing that, they embrace each other. And you'll notice you walk the streets here, you get a lot of eye contact, and you get a lot of waving. And it just sets up that connection that one has in this whole thing. So just walking the streets is one of my favorite things to do. But then, of course, I can, like, if I'm leaving here, and if I were going down to one of the coffee shops in Motto, or the kids going to school from this area, you go down this center path right through the middle of the woods. And it gets you there half the distance than if we were to go around the road, either by bicycle or car, or even walk it. So it's all these shortcuts through woods, and I could be in just total nature. So, we have, 5 restaurants, 5 coffee shops. New York Theater was just playing in the Wildflower Meadow. We have the ballet. We have all these big city things in a small town atmosphere. And then I can get so many places by just crisscrossing the woods and then the urban street. I mean, so unusual.
Well, you mentioned clustering and everything being walkable and the Omega setup. The horseshoe. Can you just talk a little bit around that and how that kind of ties everything to a core?
You bet. During my great years of retirement, which was 7, we had a dear friend in England. She lived in a little town, Selborne, which was southwest of London, between London and Bath. And so we visited there and became familiar with the foot trails, the cluster, the neighborhood food market and pub, and just this wonderful way of life in the wandering streets, and the English land laws, which really led while we were doing this. And so one of the other things we learned in England was sacred geometry, which was a new term to me at the time. And it's really just the balance of the energy forces. And this isn't a new age concept. If you look at any of your old farmers, they're going to drill a well, they get the divining rod out. I mean, you look at the Farmer's Almanac, there are energy forces in the earth that you relate to. So that's not new. And so that the idea of laying out or actually developing things in relationship to the earth. And this was Keith Critchlow did a whole thing of looking at the patterns of ancient civilizations, and they all developed a pattern in just how they were laid out. Now, they didn't have pattern books, obviously. There were some forces at work, and so he did a real study of that. And so when I realized I was going to be a developer, I wanted to bring that viewpoint just in that. And so I'd asked the Rocky Mountain Institute if they knew of anyone that could come in as a consultant just to share with us really what that meant and how we might apply that. And so they introduced me to Phil Tabb. And Phil Tabb was at that point on his way. He'd been at the University of Colorado on his way to Texas A&M to become head of the architecture department.
Right.
And so Phil was an academic, but he had his doctorate on the English village system and was a trained sacred geometrist from his time in England. And so he came initially as a consultant and ended up our full-time land planner, our whole story with that. And so it's really understanding and walking the earth and feeling the earth, and then coming up with a pattern that responds to the earth. And, we're at a period of we come up with plans and we impose them on nature. And so this is creating a plan that we think fits into nature.
Right.
And so that was how the Omega form actually came out from a 3-day shred as we really looked at the topography of the land and what could fit on the land. And also, because of bringing the Omega, we had these streams. So that was one crossing versus if you did a grid or something, it was multiple. So there was a lot of realistic reasons as well as it just fit into the land.
I didn't realize how much the Omega led to less disturbance.
Yes.
And the actual land flow. So that was fascinating.
And the other advantage is we have a pedestrian grid. So the pedestrian grid crosses those streams and crosses into nature. But because of that, if you're going, for instance, if you have the big horseshoe and you're going across the 2 feet, it's a lot easier to go from one foot to the other than to go all the way around the horseshoe.
Right.
And so that's what our whole path grid does for us.
Interesting. Yeah, I was thinking about this as this has been a 30-year journey for you, probably longer than a 30-year journey. I'm sure there were several times you found yourself probably wanting to quit. I'm sure there are pressures along the way. When you look back, what do you think makes this vision or passion so enduring when other communities have just lost their soul along the way?
We relate a lot to places that were developed 100 years ago. Mm-hmm. When the person developing the land lived there and their family lived there. And so there's much more of a personal relationship with the land and with the neighbors who are going to move into the places. And I think that's a huge difference. I did not do this to develop land as a business proposition. Mm-hmm. I did this to save the land, number one. It was the love for the land that prompted me to develop it. And once I realized I was going to develop, it was a different perspective. It wasn't how can I make the most money. Now, you do have to figure out how you can make money from it. Of course. But that did not lead me. It led with how can we have a responsible place. And the biggest surprise I had is a lot of the things that I felt were important weren't allowed. We have come through so many decades of regulations, and every fear puts a new law, and we don't even see how it adjusts other laws. And we're to the point now that we do not even understand the unintended consequences from one law to the next to the next. Yes. And that was my huge surprise that you I can't do what's right, in my opinion.
Yeah. One of the parts of your book, you talk about what's part of your title is transforming where we live with radical common sense. You talk about the waste management facility in your book, and there is a nuance where, well, it's completely natural. And there are no chemicals, but there was some sort of fence requirement that it had to be fenced in. And you're like, well, why?
That's right.
Why does it need to be fenced if there's nothing inherently dangerous there? And you eventually had the fence portion dropped.
But that's right. But I had to go all the way up through the regulatory process to get that because it's a little thing on the books. And now, so this is, I gave Reed Hildebrand all the engineering drawings, the great architectural firm out of Boston that we were working with, and said, "Here, could you make this beautiful?" And they said, "Well, if you're trying to make a point, let's put the boardwalk right over the treatment center." And today, there are more prom pictures, wedding pictures, Christmas pictures taken in the middle of our wastewater treatment center.
That's hilarious. If someone listening right now has never heard of Serenbe, so I will say you can see all you want at Serenbe.com. Serenbe.com. So if someone listening right now has never heard of Serenbe and they would want to visit it for the first time, if they're captivated by that, what is the best way do you think for a first timer to experience what you've created?
Well, absolutely. I mean, a lot of people in Atlanta think we're way far away because they can't relate to anything because this quadrant of Southwest has no roads, nothing that relates to you. You're not going through here on the way to anywhere. But we're between Atlanta and Noonan, so we're close to Peachtree City, which is southeast. So for Atlanta, it's an easy drive, as you saw. You drove in from Roswell this morning.
Really easy.
It's very easy. I even had from last weekend. For my book signing, someone drove in from Birmingham just to spend the afternoon here. So if you're within any of your southern, you're really an easy drive. And we have a country inn, so you can reserve at the old farm, farmhouse, and we've added rooms and cottages now, so you can stay there.
You can stay at the farm.
We have rooms in the community. People have their houses in the inn rental program, and we're 25 minutes from Hartsfield Jackson International Airport. Yep. So literally, we have people that fly in from everywhere. We have some people who have a weekend house here from New York. Because the flights are so easy. He said, I can get from my place in Manhattan to Serenbe faster usually than I can to get to our place that we used to have out in Long Island.
That's hilarious.
So we are easy to get to.
Yes.
And we have what I call a lot of global citizens because, if you have business in Europe or anywhere, it makes it so easy. You know, within 25 minutes of the airport, it's easy to get through that airport, and man, you can be on your flight to the capitals of the world in no time. And so that's why if you walk around, you'll see a lot of different languages, a lot of what I call global leaders living here because of our unique location for this incredible European village in the nestled in the southern forest. 25 minutes from the airport in this great city.
We started the conversation with you built a home for Marie's mother to come stay with you. You have 3 children, 7 grandchildren, and they've all ended up back here. Talk about how your family members have been involved in the evolution of Serenbe.
Yes, happy to. Well, we're naturally hospitality people. And so I determined that there were 2 landowners that owned more property than we did. And I need to figure out who they were. So I called them and we invited them to dinner. And Marie's a great cook. And so they came. And after about 4 months of several dinners and several cases of wine, we got agreement that, hey, well, maybe there could be something. And so then, of course, my next level was anyone who owned 200 acres or more would give me the 51%. And it turns out there were only 36 of us that owned the larger parcels that made up the 20,000 acres. And so I organized a meeting and invited, 32 showed up. But being hospitality people, Marie had a great dessert spread and all this great food. Well, that meeting turned out to be a disaster. About 90 minutes later, I called an end to it because the inherited landowners were the worst. They were divided. Half said, don't you dare touch this land. And the other half said, bring on the bulldozer. That's the payday we've been waiting for. And suddenly, because they'd all grown up together, I had these 70-year-old people acting like they were on the 5th grade playground calling each other names. And I said, man, we're not going to get anywhere here. So I called that off. And then it's when I had found the Rocky Mountain study and some other studies. And I had to have this. And I had this one old guy in his 80s that was kind of the voice, I could tell. And he was going to be difficult to get back, I could tell. And so I thought, I've got to get his buy-in to come because he's got a network he's going to talk to about this if I call another meeting. And so I called Mr. Thompson. I said, Mr. Thompson, we're going to have another meeting. Nobody's going to tell me what to do with my land. And I said, well, Mr. Thompson, your neighbors, one has already died and the other one's very ill. And because our schools were so bad, when their children had kids, they've moved away. So their grandkids aren't here. And no one, their descendants do not care about this land and it'll be sold. And right now, Fulton County will allow them to do anything they want because nobody's developing anything. And I know because I've talked to them, and they'll give you. I can develop anything I want. You could end up with a strip center across the street, and I said, and you'll have nothing to say about it. I'm inviting you into the conversation to determine what is going to happen to your land and your neighbor's land. There was dead silence, and I just let him sit in that uncomfortable dead silence. Pretty soon his voice came back on. He said, are you going to have that peach cobbler? I said, absolutely. He said, okay, I'll come. Okay. And so Marie kept baking and I kept calling meetings. And in 2 years, we brought consensus on 80% of the landowners. The 20% that didn't support us also never opposed us. They just never showed up. Okay. And so we were able in 2002 to pass one of the largest zoning overlays in recent history within 3 minutes at Fulton County.
That's unheard of.
Yeah, but that was because of Marie cooking all this good food and me. So the family's been involved. Yeah, and of course the girls, they were in high school and headed off to college, and so when we're actually into the throes of this thing, Garney was in her last year at Cornell University in the hospitality. She was, president of the hotel school and was getting offers. She could have gone anywhere in the world, and I expected her to. I was looking forward to all the upgrades in these suites, in these various places around the world. I thought this was going to be great. But because of the Rocky Mountain Institute, in some of the environmental deaths in the major newspapers, there have been some interest in kind of watching what these folks out in Georgia might do. And so when I actually had all my permits in place and the bulldozer was due, the USA Today sent a photographer. And so this morning, in that spring of 2004, we were on the front page with a huge picture of me in front of the bulldozer starting to clear the trees. And Garney was at the hotel school, at the hotel there at the Cornell campus, and opened the paper that morning to distribute it out on the tables as they did. And there I was staring back.
There's Dad.
And oh my God, she says, I knew Dad was going to put some houses in the woods, but what is this?
Right.
And her friends all said, well, you're going there, aren't you? And she says, well, I don't know. And pretty soon Garney calls me and she says, Dad, I think I should come home. And I said, what do you mean? That's out of the article. I said, well, what does that have to do with you coming home? And she said, well, I think I should be part of that. And I said, you're not going to put your dreams, connected. This could be, who knows where this is going? No, Garney, you cannot do that. You stay your course. And of course, Garney, being who she is, about 2 weeks later, she called and said, well, if I come back, can I use my bedroom? And I said, well, of course. Well, what do you got in mind? She says, I've just accepted a 9-month internship with the governor's office for land use.
Okay.
So she navigated her way back. And then we'd brought in one of the large real estate companies to start representing us. We'd formed up in our barn, which is now guest services. We turned that into a sales office when people came down on the weekends. And of course, she was hanging out every weekend, got her real estate license. And so when her 9 months was up, she says, hey, I'll just form my own real estate company. There's no sense in bringing people in.
Sure.
I know this land. I love this land. I should be the one selling this land.
Right.
And best thing that ever happened. I resisted then, but oh my goodness. And of course, Garney now is our chief operating officer for the whole company and several of the businesses. And so she runs it. Now she then talked to her sister, who was graduating from the University of Colorado with early childhood education and psychology, into coming back. Because she says, look, you can make twice what you'd ever make on any of these job offers just selling real estate for me. Come on back.
Right.
So Kara, who is not a salesperson anyhow, returned for 2008, the 1 year we sold absolutely nothing. And so
couldn't have picked a better year to come back to sell houses.
And so Kara, of course, then started Camp Serenbe.
Camp Serenbe, right.
Initially to attract people down to understand what we were doing, and now that's her full-time business.
Yes.
And Quinn, our youngest, was an art major. She's the one that thought the farm was always a little dirty. She would have rather we stayed in Ansley Park. She's the one that thought the business was too intense, the family business too intense. And so when she graduated, she went off to L.A. and then eventually back to Buckhead to work where, all of her friends were, coming back to Atlanta. But then we had a part-time opening in our marketing department, and it happened at a time that the interior designer was cutting back a couple hours, so it was a good fit, and so she would drive down during the day, and then that eventually advanced, and the real ringer was when my Garney announced that she had a serious relationship and he was going to move down here. And his best friend, who had been transferred in here a few years before, and they had shared a house, decided, well, he traveled a lot, so he'd maybe rent an apartment down here, and Quinn started showing up more and more, and now he's my son-in-law too. So,
right.
So two of my son-in-laws were best friends growing up in Ithaca, New York, because of that. So, not Ithaca, Kaz up on the up on there. The other son-in-laws from Ithaca. So I've got upper state New York State son-in-laws, all three daughters.
And so one's running the wine shop. Is that correct?
That's right. So Quinn's husband Lucas has the wine shop, and Garney's husband was the professional chef. He was at Bacchanalia. Right. In fact, it was Anne Contrano who introduced him, and Anne says, I don't think I thought this out when I introduced him. and he now has all of our packaged food, our jams and jellies and vegetables that you'll see with the Serenbe label on it. And then the middle, because Kara had the free time, some psychiatrists had hired her to set up a program that they had bought for the back of the house. and she very organized. So they hired her and they sent her to Seattle to train under it. And the fellow running the training program is now my son-in-law, so I brought him here. So all different journeys, but it's great.
All 3 kids, all married, all grandchildren, all here.
Right here. I see him every day. In fact, I pick them up every Saturday about 5:00, and the oldest 5 are boys. And so, man, a construction site for 5 boys.
Yeah, amazing playground.
I mean, piles of dirt and sand and trenches and houses and wood. And I mean, what a playground!
Yeah.
Just having this. And then Marie has dinner around 6:30, and then it's bath time stories, and we deliver them back to the parents at 2:00 on Sunday. It's great for all 3 generations, you know. And
have you ever thought about this? If you were going to recreate Serenbe anywhere else, would you? Or not that you want to scale it, but Serenbe has this amazing connection to the land and agriculture. There's also this whole aquaculture movement, right? Of people raising oysters and like coastal living. Would you ever consider recreating Serenbe in more of a coastal aquaculture concept, or no?
Well, here's what we realized. I did this to save the land. Mm-hmm. And what I found is we have found a common sense approach, not just to land development, but to life. The importance of art. That why aren't we growing the food? Why don't our kids know the farmers growing our food? Why are we such an unhealthy society? Why is education so messed up? I never intended to unravel some of these major social issues. But if you're going to be developer, you step into all these things to have a full community. And so rather than trying to create a Serenbe, it's not about the development pattern. It's about understanding these core issues that could apply anywhere. Mm-hmm. And so we have really determined that we are the model. We are the laboratory. Right. And we want to share this rather than us developing. That we would have to scale at such a point that's not our interest. Right. But we're interested in setting up a way to educate, and that's happening. We're at about the 10th year of hosting Nygren Placemaking Conference. Yes. We have developed a consulting firm, and we'll take on maybe 2, maximum 3 clients because it isn't our core business at this time. Mm-hmm. So we'll really deep dive and go all the way in with them from their organizing their community to the land plan to entitlement. But we have the conference 2.5 days, and developers come from literally all over. Mm-hmm. And it's a repetitive agenda each time. We talk about the whole green energy. We bring in all the people from South Face and various places to talk about solar and the options and geothermal, huge thing. We're one of the leaders. We received the Global Innovation Award in geothermal, and one of the big reasons we do that is because it's silent. Not only does it save 50% of your energy costs for heating and air conditioning, but it's totally silent. You don't have a compressor, right? And that huge noise level, we become used to that buzz that runs all of our conveniences of life, and our mind blocks it out, but our energy system doesn't. And so we can understand why people in urban areas, and the more urban, the more noisy it is. Mm-hmm. It doesn't have to be, but it is because of all the machinery and how it runs. And so geothermal is a big thing, not just for the energy, but because of the sound and the quality of life. You walk our streets; it's mandatory now. Right. You hear the birds. You hear the laughter of children through the trees. Things that are drowned out by the noises before. So this teaches everybody all these things. We bring in our HOA to talk to them. We bring in our art farm, which is a nonprofit that brings arts. That's what we bring them. And the exciting thing, what's happening now, is global leaders are moving here and setting up their businesses here because the conversations at the coffee shops. We're sort of the Silicon Valley of the environmental movement. And so agriculture now, the Rodale Institute out of Pennsylvania, the foundation of organics, have their Southeast Research Center on my neighbor's property now. The Conservation Fund launched their farm fund in Georgia to save farms in the urban areas, partly because of the development rights that are passed now in Georgia, but because this is a great place we can model it. And now they have just saved the 1,000th acre in Georgia. And luckily, it's one of the farms to our neighbor immediately across the road from Serenbe to our west here. So there's 4 major farms saved here, and they're putting people who do not normally have a path to ownership. Farmers, existing farmers who get a 5-year contract. And then if they meet their business plan, they have a low-interest mortgage to own that land. And it's a focus of women, veterans, and people of color. It's just a great program. And then what's happening, we have other people who are either retiring or stepping off corporate life that are buying plots in our greater. This is 60 square miles, and some great examples of what we're calling now homestead farming. So people growing local food, and it's anywhere from the chickens, the beef, the pork, everything we eat comes from this area now. Right. We've identified. Through our conservancy, we also have the Chattahoochee Hills Conservancy dealing with holding our development rights and doing a lot of things. And they have hired someone who's done a whole business plan on the agriculture for the area. And the city's now moving forward along with some great philanthropists who have moved here. And we're going to be hiring what you'd look at as an ag commissioner for our city. We are a laboratory that's now at Serenbe, but also this entire 60 square miles that I think is going to model now another way to develop going into the future. And we have people coming from literally all over the world. And so one of the reasons for my book is to really help explain it and motivate people, not just for development, but we're at a period where I think a lot of people are frustrated and they're expecting someone else to fix their lives. And I'm saying, hey, there's a good chance big government, big corporations aren't going to do that.
Oh, no. Right.
But and if you don't have a seat at those tables, why spend your time worried about it? Instead, look around. What is your talent? What would you like to see changed in your own backyard? Right. And this could be wherever you have influence. Your backyard is your podcast, in addition to your physical one. But I think everyone needs to look, where's your area of influence? Right. That's your backyard. How can you use that influence to change where we live? And if we all did that, what a different world we might have in another decade.
It's a wonderful concept to think of. I do want to take some time with you to ride around and check out the property in person.
As we drive around, chances are you're going to see some of the things. I mean, it's one of the key things is how people respond here. These are all really common sense things that people respond to very naturally. Whether it's one woman stopped me and she said, "Hey," she said, "I was on a diet for 20 years, and it was controlling my life, and it wasn't doing any good." And she says, "I decided one time I was just going to live life and be a little heavy." And I did, and everything's been fine. And I haven't thought about it. But we moved to Serenbe about 8 months ago, and I noticed my clothes were getting loose. I borrowed someone's scales, and I've lost 16 pounds and hadn't even thought about it. Wow. And she says, I haven't been exposed to fast food, so it's not my easiest go-to. It's in fact, it's not. The parties I go to, it's mostly healthy local food. Right. I'm walking to get my mail. I'm walking just because it's a lot easier. It's difficult to move your car if you're doing, the parking. We don't make parking that easy intentionally. That's changed. One man stopped me and he said, I just want you to know the best thing you've ever done. You've saved our marriage. I said, what do you mean you saved our marriage? They said, where we lived, we were chauffeurs. Getting our kids to the right play dates, everything, we were constantly driving. So it was always just a kettle of something on the stove and everybody ate when they could. And our lives were just going crazy. And he says the quality of life really wasn't that great. We just didn't think about it. He says, we moved here, we stopped being chauffeurs. We started having family dinners together, and we have a much better marriage. It's all of these stories that I hear almost weekly on how this has changed people's lives. And so that's, that propels me.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
That's really beautiful. Steve, thank you for inviting us into your backyard, literally and figuratively. Your story is an incredible reminder that when we start with care for the land and each other, we can transform how we live. For listeners, you can find Start in Your Own Backyard wherever books are sold, and explore Serenbe yourself at serenbe.com. Thank you so much for listening. And remember, don't wait for retirement to start living.